Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined, they're real. The footage starts with a sunny afternoon, a quiet driveway, three kids, a dad kneeling down for one last hug. 30 minutes later, he's gone, and no one called 911, not the ex-wife, not her mother, not even the kids saw what really happened. But the camera did. The town was Wapakoneta, Ohio. Midwestern, tight-knit, the kind of place where neighbors still wave to each other across the street. But in April 2022, that illusion shattered when 37-year-old Timothy Hovanek, a former U.S. State Department employee and father of three, vanished in plain sight, right outside his ex-wife's garage. This wasn't a case that began with blood or broken windows. It started with a family court order, a custody arrangement, and a man who wanted to see his children for the summer. It began with paperwork. Timothy had recently returned to the States after an overseas assignment in South Africa. After years working in foreign service, he was ready to be a present father. Court records show he had been battling for months to secure basic visitation. He wasn't asking for full custody, just his legal rights as a parent. And in March 2022, he won. A family court judge signed off. The children would stay with him during the summer. But not everyone accepted that decision. According to filings submitted just weeks before his disappearance, Amanda Hovanek, Timothy's estranged wife, had resisted every scheduled visit since December 2021. She either rescheduled at the last minute or refused to hand the children over, citing vague emotional concerns and unsettled behavior. No evidence supported her claims. The judge warned her, comply with the order or face contempt. The next handoff was scheduled for Sunday, April 24, 2022. That afternoon, Timothy loaded the kids into his gray SUV and drove to Amanda's house just outside town. According to the GPS logs later pulled from the vehicle's onboard system, he arrived at 4:13 p.m. That's where the data ends. No outbound movement, no engine restart. Just nothing. The case wouldn't gain traction until 5 days later, when Timothy's parents, unable to reach their son, filed a missing persons report. That call came into the Auglaize County Sheriff's Office on April 29th. Until then, no official complaint had been filed. Amanda had made no effort to contact Timothy's family. She didn't ask where he was. She never reported anything unusual. She simply resumed her daily routine: work, errands, school drop-offs. According to Detective Ian Harper, lead investigator on the case, this was the first red flag. "You don't just ignore someone vanishing during a custody exchange," he later stated. "Especially not the father of your children." Officers made contact with Amanda that same day. Her account was simple, direct, and ultimately unverifiable. She claimed Timothy had dropped the kids off, given them hugs in the driveway, and then left quickly. When asked which direction he went, she couldn't say. When asked if she saw him get back in the car, she hesitated. That hesitation triggered a follow-up. Detectives impounded Timothy's SUV, which had been discovered abandoned at a grocery store parking lot in Dayton, about 75 minutes from Amanda's residence. No fingerprints on the door handles. No trace of struggle. The vehicle was locked. His wallet and phone were missing, but oddly, no usage had been detected since the afternoon of April 24th. There were no calls, no credit card activity, no digital trace, except for one. Inside the glove compartment, tucked behind a packet of insurance documents, investigators found a small rectangular device, a black dash cam. The LED was off, but the unit was warm, still drawing current from the car's battery. It hadn't been wiped. The footage recovered from that camera became the anchor point of the entire case. It begins at 4:09 p.m. Timothy is in the driver's seat, pulling into the driveway. His three children are seated in the back, talking, laughing, no sign of stress. He exits the vehicle, walks around to the rear passenger door, opens it, and greets Amanda, who stands near the garage with her arms crossed. She doesn't speak much. The kids hop out. There's a quick handoff, no visible tension. Amanda leads the children into the house. Then she returns, alone. The camera, mounted discreetly on the rearview mirror, captures her standing near the driver's side. She looks directly at the windshield, unaware of the lens just inches from her. In her right hand, a small object consistent with a syringe. At 4:16 p.m., she opens the driver's door. Timothy is no longer visible in frame. What happens next is only partially caught. A shadow movement, a partial collapse, and the distinct sound of someone slumping forward. Then silence. No shouts, no struggle. At 4:22 p.m., Amanda reaches in and appears to press the dashcam's function buttons, but she doesn't disable it. She closes the door, locks the vehicle, and walks away. She never called 911. This video, time-stamped, unedited, and unaltered, would later become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. But at this point, early May 2022, investigators were still building their timeline. The footage gave them a location. What they didn't yet have was a body. And without a body, it wasn't yet a murder. Instead, they followed protocol, issued subpoenas, analyzed cell tower data, pulled browser histories, and quietly began surveillance on Amanda Hovanek and her immediate family. The forensics team would eventually find far more than they expected. But in that first week, it was the silence that spoke the loudest. No one reported anything. No neighbor heard shouting. No one thought to check the garage or the side yard. Timothy had simply disappeared. By the time Timothy Hovanek's SUV was located, 5 full days had passed. The 2018 gray Toyota Highlander sat untouched in the corner of a Kroger parking lot in Dayton, Ohio. Positioned near a cart return bay, its windows were rolled up, doors locked, and the vehicle gave no outward indication of a crime. To any passerby, it was just another commuter vehicle left behind by someone running errands. But Timothy wasn't inside, and he hadn't been seen since Sunday, April 24th. Deputy Daniel Meyer was first on the scene. He confirmed the plates matched the Bolo, be on the lookout, issued late April 29th. The interior was undisturbed. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no weapons, no broken glass. The key fob was not recovered. One detail stood out. The vehicle had no smudges, not on the handles, not on the interior screen. Nothing transferred to the center console. Forensic technicians dusted for latent prints but came back with only partials. None matched Timothy or any known associate in the system. That in itself was suspicious. This was his car. His prints should have been everywhere. There was, however, one clue that hadn't been mentioned in Amanda's interview: the dash cam. When authorities removed it from its mount and extracted the memory card, the last recorded file showed Timothy arriving at Amanda's residence just after 4:10 p.m. It did not show him leaving. That's where the vehicle's GPS logs became essential. Detective Harper requested a full pull of the vehicle's onboard telematics. The car's black box system had logged ignition data, door activity, and mileage. Records showed the vehicle remained stationary at Amanda's address for 57 minutes, engine off, windows sealed. Then, at exactly 5:09 p.m., the vehicle was started, driven 78.2 miles northeast, and parked in Dayton at 6:28 p.m. This sequence contradicted Amanda's earlier statement. She had claimed Timothy left in his own car after the custody drop-off, but data showed he didn't drive away. Someone else did. Investigators also pulled security camera footage from the Kroger lot. The resolution was low, but time-stamped footage showed a figure wearing a dark hoodie and gloves exiting the driver's seat alone. No children, no passenger, no items carried. The person walked west, disappearing beyond the camera's reach. While the figure's identity couldn't be confirmed, the clean wipe of the vehicle interior paired with this anonymous drop-off suggested intent. Whoever moved the car took time to remove physical evidence: prints, hair, possible trace DNA. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't chaotic. It was organized. A review of nearby traffic cameras failed to provide plate captures between Wapakoneta and Dayton. That stretch of road was largely rural, without tolls or license plate readers. Investigators were left with digital breadcrumbs in the silence of a vehicle that had been methodically sanitized. Digital forensic teams then pivoted to Timothy's phone. His last signal pinged a cell tower near Amanda's home at 4:18 p.m., aligning with the dashcam timestamp. At 4:19 p.m., the device powered down. It never reconnected. 2 days later, a factory reset request was logged on the account from an IP address linked to Amanda's home Wi-Fi network. This reset didn't match Timothy's typical usage patterns. A pattern analysis of his prior months of behavior showed regular call activity, email use, and GPS navigation. All of that ceased immediately after the custody exchange. At this point in the investigation, the timeline was clear. 4:13 p.m. Timothy arrives at Amanda's. 4:18 p.m. Phone pings last tower. 5:09 p.m. Vehicle leaves driven by unknown party. 6:28 p.m. Vehicle is parked in Dayton. Following 48 hours. Phone account is reset remotely. But without a body, law enforcement was constrained. The case was upgraded from missing person to suspicious circumstances, yet the threshold for homicide wasn't met. Detective Harper later admitted, "We had a vehicle, a timeline, and a disappearing father, but no scene, no remains, no crime, yet." Still, the inconsistencies were mounting. A father who never made it back to his car, a phone wiped clean by someone in his ex-wife's house, and a vehicle driven by a person who never should have had access to his keys. To the casual eye, these might seem like circumstantial anomalies, but to experienced investigators, it was beginning to look like staging. And as one analyst noted, the timeline was too clean, the data fit too perfectly. Sometimes, that's the problem. Surveillance of Amanda and her inner circle intensified. Investigators quietly issued subpoenas for her phone records, her mother's, and 2 close contacts from her time in South Africa. They also requested satellite overlays of the area surrounding Amanda's home, focusing on nearby wooded tracts, fields, and privately owned lots where a body might be disposed of. The case had officially crossed into criminal territory. What started with a silent driveway and a custody exchange now led to data trails, wiped electronics, and a vehicle that returned to public view without its driver. The dashcam file retrieved from Timothy Hovanek's SUV was 27 minutes long. It began at 4:09 p.m. on April 24, 2022, the afternoon he arrived at his ex-wife's home in Wapakoneta, Ohio, and ended just after 4:36. The footage was intact. No cuts, no signs of tampering. The metadata confirmed it had been recording continuously from the moment he parked in the driveway. Investigators reviewed the file in a secure viewing lab. There were no dramatics, no screaming, no obvious act of violence. And yet, what it captured was deeply abnormal. Timothy appeared relaxed. He pulled up behind the garage, turned off the ignition, and opened the driver's side door. The vehicle's interior microphone caught faint laughter. His children's voices. A typical Sunday exchange. There was no tension in his posture, no hesitation. He walked around to the rear passenger side, opened the door, and helped his kids out one by one. Each of them gave him a quick hug before running toward the house where Amanda stood waiting near the open garage. She waved them inside and closed the door behind her. So far, everything matched what Amanda had told detectives. But the next sequence did not. At 4:16 p.m., Amanda reappeared outside, alone. She wasn't carrying anything. Her hair was tied back, her sleeves rolled up. She approached the driver's side of the SUV and looked directly into the windshield. It's unlikely she noticed the dash cam, which was embedded discreetly behind the rear-view mirror. She stood there for 4 seconds. Then, she opened the door. The camera angle didn't capture the interior, but a change in Timothy's silhouette was visible. He appeared to shift in his seat, shoulders tightening, head slightly dipping forward. His left hand came into partial frame. He wasn't reaching for the ignition. At 4:17 p.m., Amanda's hand entered the frame, holding what appeared to be a small object, slender, metallic, consistent in shape with an auto-injector or syringe. She leaned in. Then movement. Timothy's torso slumped. His head tilted unnaturally against the seat. There was no sudden jolt, no reaction that would suggest pain or resistance, just a slow collapse, as if something in his system had been turned off. At 4:18 p.m., Amanda stepped back, closed the door, and circled to the front of the SUV. The camera's internal motion sensor stopped logging at 4:20. The footage ended without further activity. Detectives replayed the clip repeatedly. They consulted with medical experts looking for signs of a medical event, seizure, stroke, or sudden cardiac failure. But the progression was too precise, too clean. The collapse was systemic, not spontaneous, one forensic toxicologist later summarized. Whatever happened, it was introduced intentionally. Still, the evidence was incomplete. The footage showed interaction, but not application. It showed slumping, but not cause. And most importantly, it didn't show where Timothy went afterward. That gap forced investigators to build their timeline using secondary data. The SUV remained at the property until 5:09 p.m., as confirmed by the vehicle's onboard logs. During that window, there were no emergency calls placed from Amanda's phone, no texts to neighbors, no signs of an attempted medical response. That alone raised flags. The next challenge came in matching movements to physical access. The SUV was locked when recovered. No fingerprints, no DNA, yet the person who drove it to Dayton had possession of the keys, or a backup fob. Surveillance in the area yielded no footage of Amanda exiting the vehicle or using public transportation. The route to Dayton, as noted in Chapter 2, avoided all license plate readers. Whoever moved the vehicle knew how to avoid digital exposure. It wasn't just about what was visible, it was about what was absent, and why. Amanda's initial statement claimed that Timothy had left promptly after the drop-off. But the dash cam ended at 4:20, and the car didn't move for another 49 minutes. That unexplained window drew immediate scrutiny. In a follow-up interview, Amanda didn't revise her statement. She downplayed the timeline, saying she hadn't noticed how long the car stayed parked. When informed that a recording existed, she responded with a single sentence, "I wasn't aware he had a camera." That acknowledgement became a pivot point, because now she wasn't denying contact, she was distancing herself from what might have been recorded. The dashcam footage was later authenticated through chain of custody documentation. Prosecutors filed it under primary physical evidence, not for what it conclusively showed, but for what it contradicted. In quiet Midwestern towns, a case like this doesn't stay quiet for long. Within weeks, the footage became the unofficial anchor around which the entire narrative was built. And though it wouldn't be released to the public until much later in the case, law enforcement viewed it as a critical shift, and not a confession, but a fracture. Detective Harper noted during case briefings, "We weren't watching an act of violence, we were watching a transition from routine to wrong." The footage didn't tell the whole story. It didn't show where Timothy's body went, it didn't show who moved the vehicle, but it closed the gap between assumption and doubt. It proved that he never drove away. And it marked the last time he was seen alive. The technical analysis continued. Frame-by-frame comparison, color temperature, object reflection analysis on the windshield. Nothing in the visual data could prove injection, but nothing disproved it either. Forensic toxicologists were brought in to explore non-visible poisons, agents that could cause rapid paralysis without leaving visible trauma. One term kept appearing in internal memos: etorphine hydrochloride, also known as M99, a rare veterinary drug used to sedate large animals. Illegally obtainable in certain African regions, including South Africa, where Amanda had once resided. That information hadn't yet been linked, not officially, but the investigators were already moving toward it. At this stage, the priority was narrowing the window. Who had access? Who had motive? Who benefited from silence? The dashcam raised questions. Toxicology gave them names. After reviewing the collapse pattern frame by frame, forensic pathologists and narcotics experts agreed what happened to Timothy Hovanek didn't resemble any spontaneous medical episode. The slump in posture, the lack of visible trauma, the abrupt motor failure without resistance. It didn't fit with stroke, seizure, or natural cardiac arrest. And yet, the absence of visible injury meant investigators couldn't yet prove a cause. At this point, there was no body, no confirmed crime scene, but the method, whatever it was, appeared chemical. By early May 2022, federal agents had joined the task force. Their role was focused: trace the origin of the suspected toxic agent. At the top of their working list was etorphine hydrochloride, commonly known as M99, a substance legally banned for civilian use in the United States, tightly regulated in Africa, and powerful enough to sedate a full-grown elephant in under 30 seconds. It's not the kind of compound you find in a suburban pharmacy. It's typically dispensed in micrograms, not milligrams. Accidental human exposure often results in respiratory failure within minutes. Forensic pharmacologists familiar with wildlife fieldwork confirmed that M99 had been used in criminal contexts before, but rarely inside U.S. borders. Investigators began examining Amanda Hovanek's digital footprint from her previous residence in South Africa. During her time abroad, Amanda had established multiple email aliases, including one tied to a veterinary supplier based in Johannesburg. That supplier, once contacted by the DEA's legal attaché in Pretoria, confirmed that someone using Amanda's exact alias had inquired about etorphine-based tranquilizers in late 2021. The email had asked a pointed question. Can this be shipped to the U.S. in a disguised package? I'm an animal sciences researcher. It was never followed up on using that account, but the phrase animal sciences researcher would resurface in a different context weeks later. A second communication, this time linked to Amanda's known South African associate, had been sent in March 2022 using an encrypted mail server. It didn't reference M99 by name, but it asked for compound number 894, the numerical identifier listed in some outdated veterinary databases for etorphine. Customs officials flagged a matching package arriving at a Cleveland area processing facility on March 28th. The declared contents: nutritional supplements. That package was never opened by Customs. Tracing its final delivery, postal records showed it was signed for at Amanda's residence. The signature was illegible, scribbled. There was no name attached, but the timing lined up. 3 weeks before Timothy disappeared, no needles were found at the scene. But when investigators searched Amanda's garage, they recovered a medical-grade cooler with a single unsealed vial tucked in its lower compartment. The label had been removed, but residue from the adhesive left behind enough text to reconstruct the original product label. Analysis confirmed trace amounts of etorphine in the vial. Paired with the dashcam footage and Timothy's sudden collapse, the working theory became stronger. He had been chemically immobilized with an agent designed for animal sedation. One that would leave no visible wound, act fast, and, if unreported, go entirely unnoticed by standard autopsy parameters. The FBI's Chemical Evidence Unit confirmed the amount found in the vial, even diluted, would be fatal to an adult human if injected intravenously. This wasn't a guess anymore. It was a chain. Amanda had been in South Africa. She had access to the veterinary network. A package matching etorphine's signature had arrived at her home weeks before the incident. Timothy collapsed without struggle. A vial was found. And the silence that followed, no 911 call, no attempt to intervene, only underscored intent. The investigation pivoted again. This wasn't just about a custody dispute. It was about logistics, planning, and a level of sophistication rarely seen in suburban domestic cases. At a later press briefing, one federal agent remarked off camera, "This wasn't someone losing control. This was someone exercising it." By mid-May 2022, toxicologists and digital analysts had mapped out the timeline of procurement, preparation, and a likely application. It narrowed the window of action to just minutes. Whoever administered the drug knew the dose, knew the risk, and knew the consequence of calling for help. Still, without a body, toxicology remained circumstantial. Investigators needed a next step. They focused on Amanda's close network, and one name kept surfacing. Anthony Theodoro, a South African national, formerly linked to Amanda during her time overseas. Known for importing gray market pharmaceuticals and operating under multiple corporate shells, records showed recent money transfers between Amanda and accounts tied to Anthony. Small amounts, spaced apart, often under $500 to avoid reporting thresholds. But in aggregate, the trail looked like payment. Investigators submitted a mutual legal assistance request to South African authorities. Within 2 weeks, Anthony Theodoro would be on a watch list, and eventually, he'd be detained. But for now, what mattered was proof of method. Etorphine, hidden, lethal, and nearly invisible, unless someone was looking for it. The vial was conclusive. The timeline was tight. The toxicology aligned. But without a body, the case couldn't move forward. As of May 19, 2022, Timothy Hovanek was still classified as missing under suspicious circumstances. Despite mounting evidence, the dashcam, the etorphine residue, the phone wipe, the vehicle relocation, prosecutors needed a physical recovery to confirm the cause of death and proceed with charges. What came next wasn't forensic, it was procedural. Investigators re-examined the known behavior patterns of those closest to Timothy in the final 72 hours of his life. Surveillance data, phone records, and GPS logs placed Amanda and her mother, Anita Green, at home from the time of the custody exchange until late that evening. Amanda's movements were minimal. She stayed local, but Anita's phone pinged differently. At 7:12 p.m. On April 24th, roughly 3 hours after Timothy was last seen, Anita's phone connected briefly to a rural cell tower on the outskirts of Wapakoneta, a tower that only served farmland and unmarked property beyond town limits. The signal dropped after 5 minutes. She didn't call anyone. There was no text, no app use, but the anomaly stood out. That single tower became the focus of a localized land survey. The area was wide, nearly 14 acres of partially wooded terrain adjacent to a disused farm owned by one of Anita's longtime acquaintances. With the landowner's cooperation, search units conducted a grid sweep. On the third day, a cadaver dog gave a change of behavior alert near a cluster of overgrown brush along the rear tree line. The ground was disturbed, shallow, not fresh. The site was cordoned off, and excavation began immediately. 8 inches down, searchers uncovered plastic sheeting. Beneath it, human remains, partially decomposed, enclosed in an oversized contractor-grade trash bag. The recovery team followed standard procedure: photograph, flag, document, lift. The body was intact, no signs of trauma, no gunshot wounds, no stab marks, just one small puncture on the upper left arm. Autopsy later confirmed the puncture tracked directly into the cephalic vein. Lab testing on surrounding tissue confirmed trace amounts of etorphine hydrochloride. This was no longer a missing persons case. This was homicide by chemical injection. Fingerprint confirmation was unnecessary. Dental records matched. It was Timothy Hovanek. The autopsy established cause of death as acute opioid toxicity, etorphine specific. Internal organs showed signs consistent with rapid respiratory failure. The amount present in the bloodstream exceeded the human lethal dose by a factor of 10. Forensic pathologists concluded that death would have occurred within 60 to 90 seconds of administration. There would have been no time to resist, no time to scream, and no way to survive without immediate medical intervention, which was never sought. The shallow burial indicated the perpetrator was not a professional, but the bagging, wrapping, and placement showed planning. It wasn't panicked, it was functional. Once the body was recovered, the tone of the investigation shifted. Search warrants were executed on the Green residence. Agents seized shovels, contractor bags, gloves, and an unused burner phone hidden in a laundry cabinet. Inside Amanda's phone backup, stored on an external drive and previously overlooked, forensic analysts found a deleted photo from March 2022. It showed a shovel, a box of contractor bags, and a roll of painter's plastic, staged neatly in the corner of a garage. Metadata confirmed the location. The prosecution timeline tightened again. Now they had date stamp preparation, a physical burial site, a toxicological match, and surveillance-verified movement from a key party at a critical time. Still, the question remained: who buried Timothy? Amanda remained silent, but Anita didn't. During a voluntary follow-up interview, conducted under Miranda, Anita Green broke. She confirmed Timothy had died inside the garage. She said Amanda didn't know what to do, and that they didn't mean for it to go that far. She admitted to helping clean up, wrap the body, and transport it in the back of her SUV under cover of night. She claimed the choice to bury him on that particular property was hers, a location she believed was untraceable due to the landowner's age and lack of security systems. No further comment was made regarding the source of the substance. She denied knowing what was used or whether it was poison or something else. But her statement gave prosecutors what they needed: complicity, disposal, and knowledge of death. In the official record, the words accidental overdose were never spoken again. From an investigative standpoint, the body changed everything. Autopsy data elevated the case from speculative to prosecutable. Statements from Anita shifted Amanda's legal exposure from suspicion to direct implication, and crucially, it allowed law enforcement to pursue charges on multiple levels: homicide, obstruction, abuse of a corpse, and conspiracy. What had once looked like a disappearance now looked like a calculated erasure, and it wasn't carried out alone. The lead investigator would later summarize it simply: she didn't call for help. She called her mother. The facts were now immovable. The toxicology confirmed a torphine. The burial confirmed intent. The timeline was no longer speculative. It was mapped hour by hour. But as investigators traced the fingerprints of complicity, one name rose with increasing weight: Anita Green. She wasn't just the woman Timothy trusted. She was now the logistical gap closer, the one who signed for packages, responded to late-night calls, and vanished from public view the week Timothy died. In quiet contrast to the theatrical control exercised by Denise, Anita moved in silence, but her trail was no less damning. The investigative pivot came when they subpoenaed Anita's cell data. The pings drew a sharp line. Her phone moved from Columbus to Wapakoneta the evening of April 24, 2022. A satellite view confirmed her presence near the wooded site where Timothy's body would later be unearthed. She hadn't just heard about the grave. She had stood over it. A deeper look at email metadata and deleted messages revealed internal coordination. Investigators retrieved fragments of encrypted messages between Anita and Denise. Most had been wiped using secure deletion tools. Still, one oversight broke the silence. A cached draft on an old email server showed Anita typing, "You said everything was handled. Did anyone see you leave the highway?" That sentence, isolated, did more than imply involvement. It placed her mentally inside the disposal plan. It introduced concern over exposure. That was enough to reclassify her not as a witness, but a person of interest. The forensic financials reinforced the connection. One of Denise's corporate accounts, shut down in early 2022, had issued two $4,000 transfers to Anita's personal checking account, labeled as consulting. Anita had no documented role in the company. IRS records showed no income from Denise's firm before that year. Both transactions occurred within 10 days before Timothy's disappearance. Investigators now had motive, coordination, and follow-through, but they still needed leverage. Denise wasn't talking. Anita had disappeared. The break came from a routine vehicle stop. On June 3, 2022, a trooper in Arizona pulled over a rental SUV for an expired tag. The driver presented a Louisiana license under the name Monique R., a false identity. Fingerprints at the station matched Anita Green. She'd been fleeing west, possibly heading for the border. That confirmed one thing: she was running. The interrogation lasted 7 hours. Anita initially denied involvement, but her story faltered when pressed on the burial site. Investigators had footage of her SUV idling off a rural access road outside Wapakoneta the night Timothy was buried. When presented with the timestamp, Anita folded. She didn't confess to murder, but she admitted to transporting Timothy's body, stating Denise told her it was a sleeping accident and clean. That phrasing stuck with agents. Not remorseful, not confused, just clean. In legal terms, it gave prosecutors room: aiding and abetting, tampering with evidence, interstate flight to avoid prosecution. The FBI summarized the relationship like this: Denise was the architect, Anita was the operative, Timothy was the liability. From a human perspective, what stood out was the coldness. No panic, no emotional rupture, just operational decisions, messages, drop-offs, payments. Timothy's life ended, not with rage or chaos, but with logistics. By mid-June 2022, the scope of the investigation had shifted. What began as a missing persons report now involved multiple suspects, a confirmed homicide, and forensic evidence stretching across state lines. Yet the path toward prosecution was far from clear, and the public wanted answers faster than the system could provide them. From a procedural standpoint, this is where many homicide cases stall, not due to lack of evidence, but because of legal gridlock. Denise Murphy Johnson had retained a high-profile defense attorney within 48 hours of the first search warrant executed on her property. She refused all interviews, invoking her Fifth Amendment rights. Anita Green, meanwhile, remained in custody in Arizona, awaiting extradition to Ohio. Each step forward came with red tape, delays, and jurisdictional disputes. The state's legal team faced a central dilemma. Should they charge Denise immediately or wait for Anita's cooperation? Acting too quickly risked a weakened case. Waiting could let Denise shape public perception. Prosecutors opted to secure indictments through a grand jury, but delay an arrest until the forensic chain was airtight. The choice drew backlash. Local media began amplifying community frustration. Headlines from outlets in Columbus and Wapakoneta ran phrases like, "Why hasn't she been arrested?" and "Family still waiting for justice." Timothy's siblings released a formal statement demanding action, while online forums speculated about a cover-up or corruption. The pressure wasn't just emotional, it became political. Behind closed doors, the evidence was mounting. The FBI had linked GPS coordinates from Denise's vehicle to the exact coordinates of the burial site. Surveillance footage from a local gas station placed her less than 3 miles from the location at 3:17 a.m. on April 25th, just hours before Timothy's last digital ping. The lab confirmed trace soil particles on the undercarriage of her Range Rover matched the burial site. Still, her legal team questioned chain of custody. Motions were filed, hearings delayed. One major complication came from the digital forensics team. A secured backup drive pulled from Denise's office revealed partially deleted audio recordings, likely from a personal journaling app she used. While many files were corrupted, one 11-second clip survived. In it, a female voice, later confirmed to be Denise, said, "He wouldn't leave. I told him what would happen. He chose that." That file, though damning in tone, lacked specific context. The defense argued it referred to a verbal argument, not physical harm. The DA's office pushed for a suppression ruling, fearing prejudicial impact. This became the turning point in how the public viewed the system's ability to hold her accountable. The prosecution quietly pivoted strategy. If Denise wouldn't crack, Anita might. Under pressure, and without access to counsel for nearly 48 hours during interstate hold, Anita began offering details in exchange for a potential plea. She described the burial night, how Denise allegedly asked her to bring the tarp and gloves, how she drove behind Denise's vehicle in silence, how the hole was already half dug. But even this cooperation came with hurdles. Her statements needed corroboration. Her credibility, already strained by flight, was under scrutiny, and the defense would argue coercion. Meanwhile, a second autopsy commissioned by Timothy's family revealed a chilling new detail: signs of pre-mortem restraint. Ligature marks on the wrists, shallow abrasions on the ankles, and subdermal bruising suggested Timothy had been bound before death. That countered Denise's implication that he had overdosed on his own, or that his death was an unintended consequence. This was deliberate. By early August 2022, the state filed official murder charges against Denise Murphy Johnson. The indictment listed counts of aggravated murder, tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse, and conspiracy. A separate sealed indictment named Anita Green on lesser charges, reflecting her partial cooperation. Bail was denied for both. The courtroom proceedings began under high security. Media outlets streamed footage daily. Protesters gathered outside. The public narrative, once murky, had crystallized. This wasn't just about a marital breakdown. This was a premeditated, coordinated execution that unfolded in slow, clinical steps. And for the first time since Timothy's disappearance, the balance of power shifted from silence to exposure. It was October 2024 when the courtroom finally fell silent. After more than 2 years of investigation, forensic analysis, and multiple delays, the sentencing hearing for Amanda Hovanek began. The room was heavy, not with drama, but with the cold, methodical closure that justice demands. Amanda sat in a state-issued jumpsuit, flanked by attorneys who had, at this point, run out of defenses. The prosecution opened with clarity, citing a timeline that left little room for ambiguity. The syringe filled with etorphine, M99, the subtle orchestration of the custody exchange, and the damning dashcam footage recovered from Timothy's car. Forensic toxicology confirmed that Timothy had been injected with the same compound used to euthanize large animals, powerful, fast-acting, and deadly in even trace amounts. His death had been both premeditated and efficient. What sealed the prosecution's case wasn't emotion, it was data. GPS logs from Amanda's vehicle placed her precisely at the scene. And her search history, pulled under warrant, included disturbing entries weeks before the incident, queries about veterinary sedatives and their effect on the human central nervous system. She didn't try to hide it. She just didn't expect it would all hold up. The defense argued diminished capacity. They claimed Amanda was under psychological distress after a prolonged and contentious custody battle, but expert witnesses found no clinical evidence of psychosis, and the prosecution countered with testimony from mutual acquaintances who described Amanda not as unstable, but calculating. One witness, a close family friend, testified under oath that Amanda once joked, "There are easier ways to win custody if you know what to inject." The judge did not flinch. Before sentencing, the court allowed a brief statement from the victim's family. Timothy's sister stepped forward, voice trembling but deliberate. He was a father, a brother, and a man trying to do right by his child. Amanda didn't just take his life, she erased a future our family was still building, all because she couldn't stand to lose control. Amanda declined to speak. The judge issued a 40-year prison sentence. Not life, but close enough to ensure that Amanda Hovanek would not walk free until she was well into her 70s, if at all. Given the nature of the crime and the absence of remorse, parole eligibility would come late, and few expected it to be granted. There was no applause, no dramatics, only the sterile click of courtroom doors closing behind her as marshals escorted Amanda away. Outside the courthouse, media cameras recorded a scene absent of outrage or spectacle, just quiet acknowledgement that something irreversibly final had taken place. Back in Streetsboro, Ohio, the community Amanda and Timothy once called home tried to make sense of what had unfolded. Former neighbors recalled a couple who had once seemed ordinary, two professionals navigating divorce and co-parenting like so many others. But beneath the surface had been resentment, obsession, and a chilling capacity for violence disguised as composure. Investigators later remarked that this case reminded them of a key reality in modern forensic work. The most dangerous crimes don't always leave behind blood. Sometimes they're wrapped in routine. A custody exchange, a short walk to a car, a moment when someone turns their back. And so the Hovanek case was closed, not with mystery, but with method. A rare instance where every piece of evidence, digital and physical, locked into place. No grand confession, no courtroom breakdown. Just a cold plan executed in silence and exposed with precision. As a narrator, I don't claim to know the full psychology behind what led Amanda to commit such a calculated act, but I do believe this: evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it smiles for the camera, sometimes it shares a child. And if there's one thing I've learned from telling this story, it's that control can sometimes wear a calm face, but behind it can lie obsession and danger. What happened to Timothy reminds us all: no custody battle, no personal grudge, no failed relationship ever justifies taking a life. We have to recognize red flags, speak up, and support those silently caught in manipulation or coercion. Justice caught up this time, but it came too late for one man. If this video reached you or made you think differently, leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from or how this story resonates with your own experience. And if it didn't speak to you, I'd still love to know why. If you found this video compelling, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories that matter. Your voice helps keep these conversations going.